Welcome back. And the first round has come and gone. Hopefully, for your respected teams, they made the right selections, and hopefully they didn't take a swing and a miss. Had some shockers, had some players follow the first round, had some players I did not expect to go in the first round, some trades. We'll get into all that. ESPN, of course, gladly posted the first round list on here, and we're going through all the players. Maybe I'll skip some, but I think I'll go over all of them. Not really take too much time for all of them because there's some of them pretty self-explanatory. Starting with the first four picks, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell. That's where I had the order going as well, though I did not have trades in my mock draft. So, right selection, second overall, wrong team. I was very surprised that Jacksonville moved up to get Travis Hunter. Again, later on, we'll get into the whole details of all the trades and what they got in return for both teams. For Travis Hunter, again, very surprised that they would move up to get him. Gave up quite a bit to move up 3 spots, but I love the aggressiveness to really go out there and get, in my opinion, the best player on the entire draft. Very versatile. It's gonna be interesting to see how they play out the situation of the snap count on both sides of the ball. But still, love that they for that young GM that he went out there and kind of treated it as a Madden type of trade, not caring about the picks and getting someone like that, which is could also be beneficial for the Browns if the Jaguars are horrible again. They're in a position where they can draft a quarterback. Now we'll see what they do in the second round. If they go after one, if that's Shedeur Sanders or if that's Jalen Milroe, they still draft relatively high in the second round. So that is certainly a possibility. And if I quickly move over here to the mock draft, they have the 33rd overall pick or the 36th overall pick. So right off the bat, they can pick a quarterback off the board, and this is kind of a null of what I'm about to say. But if they do pass on a quarterback, they could potentially wait till next year. If depending on how Jacksonville is, maybe they overachieve. But if they have a struggling season once again and have a top 5, top 10 pick, that could be in consideration of a quarterback pick. But again, we'll see what they do in the second round with the first pick in the second. So again, Travis Hunter, again, absolutely love him as a player. There are concerns because the snap count, like I talked about, as well as his size at 180. People are concerned about how long he can last or how he's going to do in the NFL. I love the pick. I love going all in on a player like that. So A+ for me for Jacksonville. For Abdul Carter, no surprise there. I mean, you look at the other quarterbacks where you look at you like Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Darts. This is pretty self-explanatory for this pick. Even if Cam Ward was available 3rd overall, I would lean towards Abdul Carter in this one. Very tough to pass over him as a defensive player. What he brings to his skill set, arguably the best player in the draft. That some people have said as well. But certainly best defensive lineman, best edge rusher, whatever you want to put him as. Great selection by the Giants. This kind of does, for me, solidify a little bit of Thibodeau's future. I think he's kind of the odd man out, no doubt about that, with having a great dual pairing with Carter and Burns. Maybe, who knows, maybe they keep Thibodeau. We'll see with that, but to me, it feels like he's a little bit of the odd man out of those 3. For Will Campbell, again, pretty self-explanatory. Love the selection. Some people maybe had Amari Rumbo going ahead of Will Campbell as being the first tackle taken in the NFL draft. For me, I love Campbell. I think he was for me the best lineman in this year's class, and great selection for them to protect Drake May. So for the 5th overall pick, with the Browns trading back, they took Mason Graham. I know that when they was getting close to the Browns selection on TV, they were talking about maybe Ashton Jenney can go here. They go with Mason Graham with this one, which is a similar case of Abdul Carter and Will Campbell is the best player available. Makes sense. I think anything else doesn't really make too much of a impact. Though you could say Ashton Jenney, no doubt, because of the running back problem or situation they have there. With of course moving off of Nick Chubb, that could have been a selection there, but like Mason Graham, great selection for the Browns. Next for the Las Vegas Raiders, this one not surprised too. Even though my last mock draft, I did switch him up to go 1 spot originally for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 5th overall. I am going there, but the last 2 or 3, I am going to the Raiders. So not surprised there, even though I got it wrong. No surprise he goes to the Raiders. Pete Carroll loves to run the football, and it's a great pairing alongside Geno Smith and Brock Bowers. For the Giants, Amari Mumbo falls to them 7th overall. Smart, building the offensive line. Wasn't great there the last few years in terms of how they played, and also injuries and inconsistencies they've had there as too. So great selection to protect Justin Fields. 8th overall, I was a little bit surprised. For the longest time, I had Jalen Walker. Now I think if I have this correct, my very early mock drafts, I made like the 1.0, 2.0, had McMillan going here, but most of them had Jalen Walker. I thought he was just a more versatile player, what he can do on defense. But I understand why they went this way. Just trying to get as many pieces as possible for Bryce Young. I was a little bit surprised they would even go back-to-back wide receivers in the first round, though. I mean, Leggett was the 32nd overall pick, so it's not like a huge reach where they both were two, both top 10 picks. But I love it, going out there and getting as many pieces as possible for Bryce Young, going to a pivotal third year, not only for the obvious of seeing if he's the franchise quarterback, but also just worry about the fifth year option as well, because they have to decide after his third year. So again, surprised by a pick, but at the same time, I love what they're doing in terms of the aspect of helping Bryce Young out. Calvin Banks was a little bit surprised, went a little bit higher than I expected. I had him going 13th overall in my last mock draft. Good selection there. I mean, everything outside of that, I don't see where you go. Tight end maybe, but you brought back Josh Johnson. Wide receiver could have been a spot here if McMillan would have just fell one more spot down. So I have no problem with that. Colson Loveland was a big surprise for me. Maybe I'm missing something with Loveland. And this my last mock draft, I'm going 26th overall to the Rams, and I had Tyler Warren above Loveland, of course, with that one. So again, I'm very surprised with that. You look at the stats, the production this past year, very different. Though some people say, for Tyler Warren, he did heat up towards the end of the season. Who knows? Again, maybe I'm just missing something with Loveland, and I'm just a complete idiot when it comes to that. But I was very shocked that they would go that way. I thought defensive line or outside chance, maybe corner would have been a possibility here. I thought anything on defense would have been a selection here. But Ben Johnson just stacking up the offense for Caleb Williams, as well as Cole Kmet. I mean, does this say something about his future? I don't know. I mean, Kmet is a solid tight end. He does have his flashes here and there. So is there going to be a 2 tight end set? Or is Kmet out the door? Who knows? But overall, not a horrible selection by the Bears. Just a little bit surprised. The next one too that was a little bit of a shocker was Mikael Williams for San Francisco. I thought maybe Shamar Stewart would have been a pick here, as well as again corner. I thought Barron or Will Johnson, who will get later into discussions for players that fell out of the first round. But at the very least, I thought Jahad Barron would have been a selection here. I thought they really need secondary help. Mikael Williams is one of the young, in terms of the top edge rushers, if you want to look at that for the rankings, was the youngest, or if you want to count Nick Score, the second youngest, but it was only by like a couple months, I think. Not even 21 years old yet, so still has a ton of room to grow and improve. Big body defensive end, similar to Shamar Stewart in the sense also of maybe the lack of production, especially the sack category. Mikael Williams had 5 sacks this past year and averages around 5 to 6 sacks his last 3 years. You look at that all together. So again, a ton of room to grow, but help for Nick Bosa. One that really surprised me as well was Tyler Booker. That was a huge shock. That was I think for all of us we can agree that was I wouldn't say certainly a reach, but I wouldn't say that as disrespect to him or saying he's a bad player, but definitely drafted way earlier than I thought. Maybe for myself too, I'm a little too harsh on him or too low on him. I am going 29th overall to the Commanders. So I was very surprised that the Cowboys took him this early. I thought it would have been like a wide receiver or something like that. It was maybe Matthew Golden or Tyler Warren was still available at the spot, or any defensive player. Like you had Jalen Walker still on the board, Shamar Stewart. So it was very puzzling that they went with Tyler Booker. But again, I'm not bashing him. I'm not saying it was an absolute bust of a pick. Just very surprising. But at the same time too, it's the Cowboys. I feel like it's always someone like this that they do. So 12th overall, that was a big shocker. Another one too was Kenneth Grant. Did not expect him going this high. I think they got a great player for Miami Dolphins, kind of getting their Christian Wilkins type of replacement. I did not go in this high. For me, I'm going 22nd to the Los Angeles Chargers. So a little bit of an early pick, but I understand that if you truly believe he is a great player or he's your number one player available on your draft board, have no issue with that. Just a very surprising too that he went up as high as he did. So Warren, this is where I did have him going as well for the Indianapolis Colts. I think it's an absolute great selection, slam dunk for them to help Anthony Richardson or whoever side quarterback in the future that's going to help them out in the future. Great security blanket, and with the other offensive pieces they have there with Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and Jonathan Taylor. Very versatile where he lines up was all over the place for Penn State, and again, great selection, big body, tight end. Jalen Walker, I think, was also a great selection here, falling to 15th overall. Versatile. They also mentioned on the TV, on TV as well that some teams were a little bit worried about like where he's going to go, where he's going to fit long term. For not saying long term, but most of the snaps where his true position is going to be, as opposed to constantly trying to bounce him back and forth on multiple positions. But I love what the Atlanta Falcons got here. Who cares if he's not a true set on one position or the other? I think the versatility, it can hurt somebody because of the whole, jack of all trades, but not a master at anything. I don't think that really applies to Jalen Walker. I think he'll be a great player for them. And again, so very surprised that he fell all the way to 15th. Again, I had him originally going 8th overall to the Carolina Panthers. Arizona Cardinals, Walter Nolan, just one spot higher than where I had him going. I had him going to the Bengals, so relatively around where I had him going there for that one. Shamar Stewart, I had him going higher. I had him going 12th overall to the Dallas Cowboys because I thought it would have been a typical Dallas Cowboys move. But the other mock drafts before, I think I had him relatively around that range as well. I think maybe the one before that was Seattle, or the one before was Cincinnati as well. So again, for the most part, relatively around that range. I think they get I'm not the biggest fan of Shamar Stewart because of just the lack of production, especially in the sack category, only getting 2 sacks each of the last 3 years. That is a concern. I mean, he has a size, great run defender. They just have to be able to develop that pass rush ability, and if they do, that is a huge home run pick for them. But a little bit concerned for that one. A little bit concerned for that pick for the Bengals. Gray Zabel, no shocker there. This was another surprise because I didn't have him going in the first round. I think certainly in this past one, but I think maybe the last 2 or 3 was, or maybe the last 2 at least, was Emeka Egbuka. I did not think he was going to go that high, especially with Matthew Golden still being on the board. I thought Matthew Golden would have been the next wide receiver off the board after Talton McMillan and Travis Hunter, if you want to, depending on how you feel about him position wise. So good selection. That a solid player there. I mean, I like Emeka Egbuka. I was just surprised on more so the people they passed over. Jahad Barrett, I think, was right there. They went a huge pick from them. Malachi Starks, if you wanted to look at it as well. Derek Harmon, who I was very high on, who I wanted the Bills to select, who, of course, would be taken 1 pick later, or 2 picks later for where the Bucs are. So I look at, I was very surprised, like I said, for that selection that they would go wide receiver route. I think it's something they could have waited, but I get it because of the uncertainties with, of course, Chris Godwin with his injury concerns, as well as Mike Evans with a little bit of injuries, but also just getting up there in age. So I get the pick, but I thought there was other better players on the board that they could have used on a defensive side. Denver Broncos, I think you can arguably say is the biggest steal in the draft. This is immense. This is amazing that they were able to land Jahad Barron to pair him up with the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Patrick Surtain. Versatile, what he can do is slot, outside, whatever you need him to do. This was I have no issue with that. Even if there's other needs that they have with running back, if you want to look at that, wide receiver help as well, tight end too, but of course both tight ends were taken off the board at this point. Absolute slam dunk home run for me. You look at that, took the best player available on the draft board, and smart play by them. And that secondary is only even tougher to go against in need that for a division that is going to be arguably the toughest in the NFL. I shouldn't say the toughest, but I think it will still be an upgrade compared to what it was this past year when you look at the reigning dynasty for the Kansas City Chiefs, but Super Bowl runner-up, Super Bowl runner-ups, Kansas City Chiefs. You have also the Chargers, who I expect to get better at this upcoming season as well. The Raiders, not they're going to be a threat, but a little bit more respectable, better than what they were last year. So again, love what they added for Jahad Barron in that secondary. For the Steelers, this was also a shocker. I thought this was, call me a sucker for this. I really believe the reports that they were going to take Shedeur Sanders at this spot. I really did. I was stunned when I heard that it was not Shedeur Sanders and it was Derek Harmon, who I was heartbroken because that's why I wanted for my Bills. Great selection there. He brings that pass rushing ability, great size too with it as well. I think 6'5", if I remember offhand, 6'5", 310, maybe a little heavier than that. So great interior defensive lineman help. And that's where I did have, before this mock draft, and at least for the last few, I had some type of defensive line help for them because I think that was a need. Even though I don't think on PFF they listed that as a need for them, I thought that was something they needed to address. And great selection by them for the Steelers. For the Chargers, from Amon Hampton, I shouldn't be surprised by the selection because of just Harbaugh love running the football. But also I was, with not saying Najee Harris was the long-term option, but you have Najee Harris there. I thought they would maybe lean on him as well. But Hampton, again, you look at Harbaugh and what his MO has been in years past, makes sense here. Just a little bit surprised that the Chargers would take him in this spot. So not a horrible selection. Love the pick. Hampton, who some people regard as, some people say that he is better than Ashton Johnny. Take it for how you will if you think that's crazy to say. But it just shows how many people are very high on Hampton. Certainly a bigger out of the two, with Jenny being 5'9", Hampton being, I think, at least for PFF, going off their standards, 6'1" on its selection. So a bigger body, running back at this one and pairs up nicely with Najee Harris. So for Matthew Golden, I got the selection right as well. I had Matthew Golden to the Packers, and he goes there as well. I think certainly bringing that wide receiving help that they need with the uncertainty with Christian Watson with his injuries. He was supposed to be more of the deep threat wide receiver, but with Matthew Golden, I see that as maybe as Josh Jacobs would say, we need a number one wide receiver, and Matthew Golden can certainly be that pick for them, that wide receiver for them in this offense. And again, I love adding the offensive firepower for Jordan Love. Another one too that kind of caught me off guard was Donovan Jackson. I never throughout my whole process, I did not have him going in the first round. So a little bit of a puzzling pick there. Not saying it's a bad pick. They need offensive line is a little bit of need, as you saw late in the first not late into the season where the offensive line was kind of crumbling for Sam Darnold. So very again no surprise not surprised they went offensive line, just surprised on the player that they selected. For the Giants, trading back up to the first round with the Houston Texans. This is another one where I thought this is Shedeur Sanders, and they kept saying they kept really trying to push his name out there too as he was dropping in the first round. I thought that again, there's no way they're gonna pass on Shedeur Sanders at this point, and they take Jackson Dart. I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that we are really seeing Shedeur Sanders fall. Regardless of how you feel about him being a first round quarterback, I just thought some team would just take him. Whether you think he deserves it or not, I thought he would go in the first round at some point, and he dropped. And maybe that really shows was the hype throughout this whole process about him. Just it was nothing. We were overhyping him. We were doing was it too much? Was it just the name, the Sanders, that was really giving his credibility throughout the whole process? So we'll see what happens in the second round, how far he falls in that one. But for Jackson Dart, surprised that the Giants took him there. There was speculation that Dart would be a first round quarterback in a spot, and I think it'd probably be relatively around where he was selected. I think early on I had going to the Steelers, 21st overall. So for that one, surprised that the Giants would come back into the first round. They select a quarterback, but for them they got their guy and their minds. So great selection by them. If it pans out, if you truly believe them, great pick. We'll get into the trade compensation of what they gave up to get back to the 25th overall pick on that one. James Pierce, another great selection there. I think that was also a trade as well. And I think they really did well in the first round with Jalen Walker and James Pierce, really getting that pass rushing ability. James Pierce a little bit undersized, at least for the weight wise, but for me, I think he'll be a good player for them. And again, I love what they did in the first round with Jalen Walker and James Pierce. I think it's definitely so you could say an A, certainly at the very worst an A grade for them, or a B plus if you want to be a little bit harsh for them, but certainly an A grade for what they did in the first round. Like James Pierce, again, just a little bit lighter for his size. He'll fix that. He'll be bigger and stronger. So great selection for the 26th overall pick. Malachi Starks. This was another player I was thinking maybe the Bills they could fall to Buffalo. Great selection for this one, and not necessarily a huge need. I think there was other positions to go to, but you can look at this maybe as just best player available, and a great pairing alongside Kyle Hamilton. So no doubt they're going to have a strong secondary, especially in that safety position. Great selection there for that. The Detroit Lions, I was surprised they went with Tyleik Williams this high. I thought, of course, all the other interior defensive linemen were already off the board there with Walton Nolan, with what else? We have Kenneth Grant, of course, was taken off the board. Harmon. So you look at that, maybe the next defensive lineman available, even if maybe he wasn't a first round grade. For them, obviously they felt that. For me, I looked at him as a second round player. So you look at that, may as well take the selection here because he's not going to be available next time we pick. So I get that. Maybe a little bit of a reach, but I get the pick. Josh Corley Jr. for Washington. I had offensive line going there. I had Tyler Bookett there originally, so now makes sense there for offensive line help. Got to protect Jane Daniels. This was a tough one for Maxwell Harrison because I was already, as a Bills fan, I did not know what they were going to do. I was very heartbroken that Derek Harmon was off the board, that Malachi Starks was off the board. What are they going to do with corner? I think that's where my final mock draft had was Derek Harmon. The one before that, I was thinking, well, maybe they go with Trey Amos from Ole Miss, but they go with Maxwell Harrison. Certainly from the Bills side of the Bills fan side of it, for on Twitter and seeing social media, very mixed emotions. I think overall it's pretty even, maybe slightly towards the disappointed side of it because people thought Amos was there, and also Will Johnson still available on the board. But for Maxwell Harrison, brings amazing speed, 4.28 at the 40. Great, it's rebound if you want to say to get back to the wide receiver to make a play. Certainly some things he has to fix, but good man corner as well, and I think will fit perfectly as a corner too alongside Benford. And then finally, to wrap up the last two picks, we had a trade here, just one switch as well for the Eagles, moving up to one spot with Jahad Campbell. He fell a lot farther than I thought because originally I had him going 15th overall. I thought at least he'd be a mid first round pick, falling all the way to 31st, but there's the injury concern. So I think this is an absolute steal once again for the Philadelphia Eagles, and this one already helping a defense that is already, I think, already stacked in my opinion, at least for how well they draft as of late for the last few years. Already add another piece to that. Does this say something about Nakobe Dean? I'm not sure, but certainly you can look at this as, hey, best player available in our boards and in the draft right now. And then finally wrap up the Kansas City Chiefs. I do have who I had the same pick as well, Josh Simmons from Ohio State going there. Pretty self-explanatory with the offensive line help for what they need. That was pretty evident, especially in the playoffs between the Texans and the Super Bowl versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now to get to the trades that did happen and what teams gave up. So we're going to start out with the biggest one, the first one between the Browns and the Jaguars. So the Jaguars, the Jaguars receive the second overall pick, of course. They get Travis Hunter. They get also the fourth round pick, the 141st overall, the sixth round pick, or 200th overall. The Browns receive, of course, the fifth overall pick, which was Mason Graham, the second round pick, a fourth round pick, and a 2026 first round pick. Now, a lot of people came out of this, especially for on TV, as them winning this trade. They thought it was an absolute great return of what they got, and it could be depending on how Jacksonville does. That first round pick could be immense at what they could do, and especially if the Browns don't have another good season, you're already looking at maybe potentially 2 top 10 picks, which would be immense for them. So it is a steep price to move up a few spots to get Travis Hunter, but I love what Jacksonville did. I love the mentality, just going out there and getting your guy, not worrying about the picks. So I absolutely love that for that one. Next, we have the New York Giants. This was the one for Jackson Dart. The Giants only received the 25th overall pick. The Texans received a second round pick, 34th overall, a third round pick, and a 2026 2026 third round pick. I may have, if it's on screen right now, I may have accidentally put first round pick on there. I apologize. It's a 2026 third round pick if that was wrong. Next, we have the Falcons and Rams. The Falcons receive a 2026 the 26th overall pick, which is James Pierce Jr., and a third round pick. The Rams receive a second round pick, a seventh round pick, and a 2026 first round pick for that one too. We look at the minor change for the Super Bowl teams for the Eagles and Chiefs. Basically, the only thing that they gave up was they swapped picks, and the Chiefs get a fifth round pick in return, 154th overall. And to wrap up, the one that started before the draft, which is nothing too crazy, was again the Browns and Texans making trades. The Browns receive a fifth round pick this year, 166th overall, and a 2027 fifth round pick. The Texans receive a two sixth round picks, 179 and 216, as well as a seventh round pick, 255th overall. So that wraps up the 5 trades that were done in the first round, 1 before the draft started, I should say, and then 4 during the draft in this one. And now going into the players that fell, that was surprising. You're seeing on screen now, the ones that are highlighted in orange, as you see, is players I had going in the first round. So, of course, we had to start off with the biggest name, the biggest player that people are talking about, is Shedeur Sanders, falling out of the first round, followed by Mike Green, Will Johnson, Luther Burden, Donovan Ezekwu. If I butchered that, I apologize. Donovan Ezekwu from Boston College. Trey Amos, Nick Scorin, and Nick Manuri. The only 2 I didn't have going in the first round was Luther Burden and Trey Amos in my final mock draft. And going on the list, it's starting off the top for Shedeur Sanders. Very surprising. Depending on how you feel, regardless of how you feel about him as a quarterback, if he's overhyped or if he's a great player, if he's going to bust, whatever you feel about it, I was just very shocked that no team took him. I'm going back to the process, going through the list. I thought Pittsburgh was going to take him. I thought the Giants, when they traded back up, was going to take him. And this is definitely a huge hit and embarrassing if you want to look at this as Deion Sanders and Shedeur, when thinking that it's prime time once again. We're gonna it's gonna be, we're gonna celebrate. We're gonna make it big. We're gonna of course make a big thing about this, and just seeing both those guys watching the TV and just seeing him fall from early on what they thought to the mid to late to not even being first a first round pick, where you go all the way back to when Deion said he guaranteed him being a top 5 pick, and it was not a case. And again, it just goes to show about, did we overhype him? Was the name Sanders the only reason why he was getting his spotlight and credibility? We'll see with that. I like Shedeur Sanders and what he can bring to the table. I'm not saying he's an elite player, or he's going to be, I should say, a top 5 player, or you can say elite player. He's going to win Super Bowls, he's going to win MVPs, but I like his skill set and what he can bring to the table for a respective franchise. But again, that was a little bit very surprising that Shedeur didn't go in the first round at all. Mike Green from Marshall was another one too. I was very surprised that he did not go in the draft. I have him in my mock draft going 16th overall to the Arizona Cardinals. Very surprised there, but you also have the character concerns with him as well, so maybe they just pushed him out of the first round. You have Will Johnson, another corner that I talked about that was, for some teams I thought he would go to, where it really showed the injury concern for his knee. And I have him very high, 11th overall to the San Francisco 49ers. But again, it's that injury they kept bringing up constantly, that he was available as he was falling, that teams are very concerned about his future and how long he can last. They said also, they said specifically into his second contract in the league. So that was, again, very shocking also that he did not go in the first, and that's going to be a great pickup. And again, depending on how teams feel about the knee and his injury and his long-term playing time in the NFL, I think that'd be a good selection there. If they can deal with, even if at worst case it's just, hey, it's a rookie contract for 5 years, that's depending on what said team takes them for a win now situation. That could be a good pick there, but for long term, of course, I understand why. Luther Burn too, character concern, not character concerns, more of like just the effort on the field, how he is. I thought some team did take him. Even though he was not a first round pick in my final mock draft, the one before, he was a first round pick, so I did get it right technically for my last one. But again, I thought there was an outside chance that a team would select him. He does fall into the second round. Donovan, another one too that I thought was going to go. I had him going 32nd overall to the Philadelphia Eagles. You could look at that maybe as the size concerns of only being 6'2". Does that play a factor into it, as well as I've heard other people concerned about, is he an all 3 down type of player? So he does fall into the second round there. Trey Amos, this is another one too where, yes, I did not have him going in the first round, but in the one prior, I did have him going to Buffalo with a 30th overall pick there. He does slip into the second round. Nick Scoren as well. I had Nick Scoren in my last one going 27th overall for that one. And then for Nick Amiri, I had him going 24th overall, which is a little bit of a surprise too. I thought people would just fall in love with his size, 6'3", over 200 pounds. They like 212, 215, and maybe thinking, hey, we can replicate the next Kyle Hamilton in this respect, in our type of defense. And I had him going to Minnesota, where I thought Brian Flores could do a phenomenal job with him. He slips into the first, out of the first round, which if you're going off the combine, he probably would have been a first round pick. But as the weeks went on between from the combine to the draft from yesterday, he started to really cool down and fall on people's draft boards. So a decent amount of them falling out of the first round, or if not being a late first round pick. He was mocked a couple times to the Bills, and being a little bit higher, around the 24th overall pick as I saw. So again, a little bit surprised that he fell that far. And that's gonna wrap it up. I mean, we can do a preview real quick about looking again at the second round there. Cleveland, like we talked about, has 2 picks in the first 4 picks, so quarterback can certainly be a spot here, which Shedeur Sanders with Jalen Milroe if you like him as a player as well. For the Texans, I'm not sure where they go here. Wide receiver could be a spot here, so Luther Burn could be an easy selection here. Or for the Tennessee Titans, maybe if he does fall, if you look at everyone else on here. Yeah, I think maybe everyone else be a tad bit high. Who knows? Maybe if they want if they like someone, they can take them. But Luther Burn be certainly the first wide receiver, I think, off the board in the second round. As well as there's still quality players: Trey Amos, Nick Scoren, players we haven't even talked about with Benjamin Morrison, Colin Winston Jr., Xavier Watts is another one, Jaden Higgins, Landon Jackson, Siobhan Ravel is another interesting prospect too. If you're on the list here, Carson as well for linebacker, as well as Trayvon Henderson. When I saw us be able to have him going late in the first, right before the draft started too. So it's gonna be very interesting to see how round 2 starts out with. Again, a lot of quality players. Some people still in the still first round players that I had going in my last mock draft. So a ton of value still for these respected teams, and we'll see what happens in the second round. Again, like I said, for the first round, hopefully your teams made their right selections for round 2 and 3 tonight.